Honestly, what lights me up is connecting with people.
Mm.
And I would say, as a filmmaker, as a storyteller, as a communicator, I love connecting with people. And I love being able to get the messages that I care so deeply out to the world and to do it with fun.
Mhm.
It's like life can be fun. It can be um, energizing. And, there's a lot of big things that we need to solve and take care of out there. And it's a lot easier when we do it together.
Welcome to Landmark Difference Makers, where we interview people making a remarkable difference around the world. Get ready to be inspired. Let's jump in.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Seamus Ford, and I want to welcome you to Landmark Difference Makers. And I'm here with Christine McCormick-Harris. Hi, Christine.
Hey, Seamus.
Christine, I'm pretty excited about the person we're going to be interviewing today. It's Keresey Pearl, and she's an award-winning cinematographer and filmmaker and a very skilled fundraiser. And her passion lies in crafting compelling visual narratives that drive real-world change. And you can imagine with the power of film, the kind of stories that can be told. But she's the co-founder of Blueprint for Impact, and she collaborates with multidisciplinary leaders to catalyze regenerative solutions from ecosystem restoration to resilient community systems, and beginning in Appalachia and now inspiring global action. She's got a docuseries that's coming up called Blueprint Appalachia, which we're going to talk about. I think we're going to have a chance to even see the trailer for it. But it really captures community-driven efforts in disaster recovery and habitat repair, something is very near and dear to my heart. So I'm looking forward to it. But I'm also excited just to see how storytelling can make a unique impact. So and she's here. Keresey, welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Seamus and Christine. It's so wonderful to join you both on this podcast. And to everybody else who's joining us tonight, thank you for making the time to hear this conversation. Everything you were just sharing, Seamus, just to boil it down, what's the essence of that is how do we come together in community and collaborate and create meaningful change? And how do we use storytelling as a powerful vehicle that can help create that change? And I'm really excited to talk with you both about some of the pieces you just spoke into.
Well, why don't we start with how Blueprint for Impact came about?
Thank you. Well, the original impetus was post Hurricane Helene here in Asheville, North Carolina, a place that has been deemed a climate haven. Interestingly, most of us who have lived in this region, we moved here because we know that it's a place that is typically isolated from these kinds of events in the world. And, it's a gorgeous community, people very connected to nature, to food, these kinds of things. So when Hurricane Helene hit this community in September of last year, September 2024, it was something that none of us really knew what to expect because an event like this hadn't hit this region ever. The last hurricane that was of any amount was back in 2016, I believe, excuse me, 1916. And it was something that, was maybe like a quarter the amount of damage to the region that this created. And so seeing what was happening post hurricane and seeing, people kind of responding to the community and the devastation that, we were noticing, these region areas being flooded, towns being cut off. And as a filmmaker, I stepped back, with my partner and said, what can we do with film to help create the message of what's going out of this region right now? And there's a lot of stuff being showcased on national news that's not actually the story of what's happening in this region. And what I mean by that is there was absolutely a lot of devastation, a lot of trauma that was happening because of this hurricane event. Although the bigger overarching story of what was happening was community coming together. And that's why I gave that backdrop of who this community is, people coming together to help one another, regardless of political party, color of skin, class. It was like everything got erased in that moment of this disaster. And
Yeah,
to be
yeah.
able to witness that and to be able to capture that on film was pretty powerful.
Well, I want to definitely get into the storytelling. But one of the things that I was really struck by is, I shared with you before we started, I had my own experience volunteering after Hurricane Michael in the Florida Panhandle. And one of the things that
Mm,
um, really stayed with me is uh, there is such an attraction to disaster by the media and such a
mm,
massive concentration of coverage around the time of it and perhaps, in the days following. But then the news moves on and the community remains behind.
mhm.
And you said something about the people of all those different backgrounds, and I led wilderness trips at one time in my life, and one of the things I loved about wilderness education is that Mother Nature doesn't care whether you're prepared or not. Mother Nature just does Mother Nature,
Yeah.
and if we all wind up on a roof in a flood, it doesn't matter what your station in life is. We're just humans. It boils it down to the most basic. And um,
Mm.
what's happening in Asheville and the
Boots on the
surrounding
ground.
areas right now? Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for just drawing that present. As it's been 9 months of recovery efforts, and anybody who's been through. So I did a documentary post Hurricane Katrina. This was way back when New Orleans got hit, right? I was just coming out of college, and I was an up and coming documentary filmmaker and had the opportunity to work on a documentary about that hurricane. And so it's kind of like this has come really full circle for me in regards to Hurricane Katrina just finished some of its projects this year, and that was 20 years ago. And so looking at what's happened in this region of Asheville, this is a long game. The rebuild efforts, the amount of energy and resource that it requires to rebuild after something like this and to do it in a way that's different. And that's really what a lot of the folks in the community are looking at is how can we, yes, put that bridge back where it needs to go. Yes, put this highway, historically where it's been, although also look at nature and what's happening with these climate disasters and expecting these kinds of things to happen again. So honestly, Seamus, that's been a lot of the conversations we've been having with Blueprint for Impact. So just to back into how the impetus of it started was me documenting and then joining forces with a couple of amazing professionals in the town. Other people who were interested in creating meaningful change in this region post hurricane. And so I'm, this filmmaker activist over here working to create change and using storytelling as the vehicle for that. And then there were other professionals in the town that were using their means to do that as well. And then how are we coming together to create conversations around the long-term vision of what's happening post Hurricane Helene? And this is not looking at the 3 to 6 months, this is looking at the 5 to 10 years. And so how are we coming up with solutions that are innovative and thinking about how are communities becoming more resilient? And what does that mean when we say that? How are we looking at our food systems? How are we
Well,
looking at
let's for the people that maybe haven't given a lot of thought to that, and my experience is that, you know, many people, if particularly people that live in large urban areas, don't really think a lot about the systems that underpin their daily life and daily comfort, and much less health and well-being and sanitation and everything else. Um, but what is it that you mean when you talk about regenerative solutions?
it's an interesting word and it's a tough one for some people to say even. And it's honestly something that when something is regenerative, that means it brings energy back into itself. A regenerative system is one that is a whole system. So how are we thinking about the whole of a community? We're thinking about food and farming. We're thinking about water. We're thinking about the small businesses in the town. We're thinking about basically the whole of what makes up a community. Because when we're rebuilding a community or building a community, because we don't have to wait for a disaster to do this well, right? So, Seamus, you just mentioned some of these systems that are underpinning our lifestyles, and we don't necessarily think about them until they get broken. And that's what happened here in Asheville, is this complete reset to allow us to look at our systems and go, do these actually serve the people? And what does that mean when we ask that question? Are we looking at systems that are helping people to come up in small business in a community, that are helping people to be homeowners, helping people to pay down their debts, send their kids to good schools, all the things that we all care about, have access to good food and clean water, and these kinds of things that I think we often take for granted being here in America. And it's wonderful, honestly, that we actually do take that for granted. That actually says something about like where the culture is at, that we take fresh water and clean food for granted when it's, like access to that is not, it's not always promised. And when we go through a disaster like this, and we have fields where farmers literally can't farm right now because the soil is so toxic, because the floodwaters brought a lot of toxic material, heavy metals, gasoline, these kinds of things that were literally in the floodwaters are now on the farmers' lands. So how do we think about systems that are, remediating the soil? And what does that mean when I say remediating? It's purifying and detoxing the soil. So we need to be thinking of systems, and these are all the partners that we have in our projects that we have 6 pilot projects right now. And these 6 pilot projects are all around everything I just mentioned. Small businesses. We have one project in particular that's around microeconomies in the community, which is small business working with arts and culture and local food vendors. And then we have an amazing organization that we're working with called Bounty and Soul. And they serve food to almost 26,000 people a month for free. And this is all healthy produce. So this is, growing up the way that I did. I mean, I was a farmer's kid, although, just to be perfectly transparent, we also got food from the food shelf. And it's not something that is, there's often a lot of shame associated with that. And so how to bring a sense of dignity to people being able to come and stand in line for this food. This is what this organization does in this community. So these are just some of the examples of some of the places that we're working with right now. Leaf Global, for instance, it's a foundational organization in Asheville, North Carolina, in this region, and it's global. And they're celebrating their 30th year, and they're one of our partners right now. And that is talking to arts and culture, which anybody who visits Asheville, North Carolina, what are the basic things that you're going to be enjoying? Arts and culture, food and beverage, and outdoors, nature. And so all of our projects are surrounding those components, what really attracts people to this region and also serves the local residents.
Why don't we play the trailer for
Please.
yeah, and then we can talk about it after.
Perfect. Great.
As we look upon our planet from space, we witness its undeniable beauty. Yet as we zoom in, the harsh reality unfolds. We are no longer just witnessing these disasters from afar. They're happening here on our doorstep.
Category 4 Hurricane Helene could gain even more strength before official...
We thought everything was okay. We did not realize the extent of it.
One night of water changed everything for everybody in this community.
Our equipment, our couches and our stuff was caught in the rafters of the ceiling. That's how powerful the water was.
We're still in that place of identifying what does our next chapter look like.
We need to prepare for a future that includes storms of this intensity with greater frequency.
After Hurricane Helene, a small group of people came together to create a blueprint for new ways to fund and support high-impact projects, shifting from isolated efforts to collective action. At Blueprint for Impact, we're reimagining what's possible. We're bringing together people, businesses, innovators to come across sectors to work together to create higher impact solutions. Because we know that small groups can make big change when we come together.
We have talked to hundreds of leaders. They are at capacity dealing with the urgent needs of our community. That's where our organization really steps in, to bring people together to build high impact initiatives. Once we have those high impact initiatives coming together in a portfolio, what we call a collaboration portfolio, we actually then look at innovative funding solutions to get those portfolios funded.
We're weaving together voices from every corner of this region. This is our chance to do something differently, to build something equitable, regenerative, and lasting.
Our first collaboration portfolio features 6 projects, each a living example of what's possible when community leads, from regenerative agriculture and wildfire resilience to food equity, arts and culture, local business and nature-based wellness. Together, they span climate, culture, economy, and health. Rooted in Appalachia and ready to inspire change far beyond it. Because we really hope that Blueprint for Impact can be a scalable model for the world.
Business owners in the River Arts District are seeing major cleanup happening.
Rebuilding is everybody's business. Progress is good, innovation is good, expansion is good, growth is good. We just don't want people to forget what was there before.
One of the things that has happened over the past 50 years is that disconnection of where you're from.
Here, there's a lot of people who don't know what is the roots. That's why in Africa, these people, they don't have any money, they don't have anything, but they're just happy.
The act of coming together and sharing stories has historically been a way that communities have flourished and passed knowledge to future generations. We know and believe that if we don't remember the history and the story of where we live, how can we move forward in a good way? The French Broad River is over 325 million years old, witnessing more history than we can begin to imagine. She predates the mountains, dinosaurs, and all mammals. She is the lifeblood of this land, the silent keeper of Asheville's story. This land has seen hardship, displacement, destruction, and imbalance that still shape our present. And throughout time, this region has been home to visionaries, innovators, and pioneers, people who saw beyond the challenges and worked to preserve the soul of this place. We are not just restoring what was, we are reclaiming a way of being that honors the land, the people, and the stories that endure.
We have an opportunity to create a new blueprint that can improve our resilience.
Because when we lose our history, we lose our identity.
This is how we keep the dream alive and being an example for our children and living this life. And give thanks to all of those that gave before so that you could have the privilege to be here today.
A beautiful documentary. And, for anybody who might be listening to this on audio, definitely encourage you to go check it out on the Blueprint for Impact website.
Thank you.
Let's talk about how film raises consciousness. And just a little bit of context for my question. One of the things that when it comes to the climate and the changes that are happening in the climate, there's a part of human nature that is sometimes compared to frogs in a slowly boiling pot of water, which if you're not familiar with that, it's actually a literal thing that if you put frogs in a pot of water and you gradually increase the temperature, the frogs will never leave, including past the point where they're scalded. And it's compared to human behavior and human beings' relationship to the climate crisis in many ways, and I think it's apt. What is it about cinema that has the potential to impact that? I guess the word would be complacency.
A great question. Thank you, Seamus. Thanks for showing the trailer. That does, showcase to people. One of the things as a filmmaker is I'm always keen to show, don't tell. Let the visuals really help people to be inspired and to evoke emotion. That's always been something since the beginning of my filmmaking, back when I got started in journalism, in my mid to late teens, and forayed into mainstream corporate journalism, quickly realized that wasn't my platform to get my messages out, and desired to move into documentary filmmaking as a way to create social behavior change. And I think that talks to what you're talking about, Seamus, which is how do we help people to see something and want to do something, like it evokes something, whether they give money to a project. Like you mentioned, I've done a lot of fundraising with my films over the years, because when we can inspire people and get them excited about something and shine the spotlight in a certain direction using beauty and light and sound, which is what makes up movies. And that's part of what makes movies so magical, and why Hollywood has been what it's been for the world, honestly. And who we as people, to just tap into the psychology of what you were just talking about, Seamus, the psychology of humans is that we like pretty things and we go towards shiny objects. And so how do we use that for people, not to distract them with this shiny object over here, which is, these devices that we're on so much, that we as a culture can tell that we have this, affinity for this thing. And how do we instead use media as a way to touch people, to connect people, to help people to feel more engaged with their environments, with the things that, political, what's going to make somebody care deeply about something and want to create change in the world, is we have to make it personal, and it has to touch something inside of them. And as storytellers, that's what we're working on. Joseph Campbell, one of the godfathers of storytelling with the power of myth, we're drawing on things that are innate within humans, which is, when I say once upon a time, people lean in a little bit. They're like, oh, a story is about to be told. And so how do we use beautiful images, beautiful sound to draw people in? And, I saw years ago that I didn't want to bring people in through fear. There's a lot of documentaries out there that use the fear tactic to, kind of fear people and shock people into change. And I never thought that's a good idea. Because, certainly it gets people to pay attention, but it doesn't motivate them. So how do we motivate people? And this is one of the things I honestly love about Landmark, to just like throw it back to Landmark for a minute, because of the community that I've built within the Landmark community, is people who are actually excited to connect with one another, excited to share stories through communication, excited to see that there's this beautiful fabric of humanity that's all connected. And so how do we use filmmaking as a vehicle to help us feel more connected? And that's where I think we have the potential for incredible change through filmmaking.
It's actually interesting. One of the things I do in my accountability is I create videos for Landmark. And as a staff member, but also like you, Keresey, as a graduate of the Landmark Forum, the Curriculum for Living, right? As so many people who are listening and here with us now, that is like that ever pressing inquiry that we almost don't want an answer for, because it is what motivates us, is how do I have whatever this message or this communication is now be communicated in a way that is appropriate to the paradigm that people are communicating in now, which is audio video on their phone, social media. So can you share with us a little bit about what you've gotten as a Landmark graduate has specifically aided and assisted you in the creation and fulfillment of your masterpiece?
Oh, I love that question. Yeah, absolutely. So, everything that I've loved about Landmark, so I've done the forum and I've done a few communications courses, and I'm eager to continue with the work because I see what it does for myself personally, as far as overcoming obstacles in communication and kind of moving past things that were all in my mind. I wish I could pull on some of the phrases. We are meaning making machines. I remember that from my forum days, and realizing like, yes, we are. We make meaning out of everything. And so what does that mean? How do we help people to create meanings that are helpful to them? And so how are we as storytellers, how am I as a storyteller using this very powerful way of communicating to create more good in the world? And this is one of the reasons I stepped out of corporate news, because I saw that I had this powerful gift of being a visual storyteller. And I knew that I was one of the ones that was helping create literally like the vision and the dream of what the culture watches. It's like when we watch a movie, it's like an out picturing of what our imagination is doing, and we're living that out. I truly believe that. I think that's what's happening culturally with a lot of the popular stories. That's another conversation, but it's one of the reasons that I do know that having a backbone of really fantastic communication skills and understanding like the underlying layers of how we're communicating and what that means when we bring something to somebody and the intentionality of that. So I feel like Landmark has absolutely helped me to see that there is this powerful way of that which I speak, that which I write, that which I create in video form is going to create messages that are going to ripple out into the world.
Yeah. And look, I'll take the opportunity because you've presented it for me. One of the misconceptions we as Landmark graduates have is that stories are bad and wrong and we shouldn't have them. And that's not the case at all. Stories are stories. And I love how you've chosen to take something that is so universal that we all experience and use it to communicate in a way that is empowering and uplifting and gives people something to step into. Right? Like I could totally see myself when we watched that video in the people there in Asheville.
Thank you. Yeah, that's honestly one of the biggest pieces. Seamus, I mentioned this a little bit when we were hopping on the call and just kind of chatting a little bit beforehand. The human face of the story. How do we put a human face on disaster? Because this is one of the things, a lot of the footage we watch, it's drone footage. And so it's from up here and it makes us feel very displaced. And this is what you were talking about with that disaster, Seamus, that you went and you assisted with. You wouldn't have known the extent of the disaster had you maybe not experienced it firsthand and seen that tractor trailer truck or whatever it was that you saw completely, twisted, the metal.
Yeah, it's in fact, I'll say it like for me, the experience one of seeing the aftermath of a disaster, the power of a hurricane is abstract until you have seen it. But that's not really what I was left with after. What I was left with was the people that I had a chance to work with as I volunteered, and my wife and daughter, we volunteered, and I pride myself in my interest and connection to people, it's a self-expression for me, but it was really jarring to realize how much I held their experience as an abstract concept.
Mm.
And one of the things that I'm struck by, in the trailer, it talks about the hub. There's a second part of the name to the hub in
Yeah,
downtown
the
Asheville.
impact hub.
The impact hub. Thank you.
Yeah.
Is that multidisciplinary approach,
Yeah.
and that people have to think inside of systems are complex enough that nobody will blame you for being obsessed with the system you're responsible for.
Mm.
If it's the water system or the education system, name the system. We all have systems that, we're responsible for. But you're calling upon, and what's called for is your system's role inside of a larger integrated system.
Mm.
And I think so often what we find in that abstraction is people really don't see how their actions can have an impact on the larger whole.
Mm.
Like, that we would be arguing, to go back to energy systems of the 19th century, or that we would be arguing for our rights as individuals
Mm.
when there's such need in front of us. It
Mm.
belies something, right? It's not to it's not to make anybody wrong. It's just there's like a part of human nature that's at play here, which is, we seem to only be able to hold our bit.
Mm.
And when confronted with the totality and the integration of all the systems and what's needed, you could never deal with it as an individual. It has to be dealt with through community. And I get the sense I'm getting is that's what you're tapping into with the hub.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And the actual physical space is important to get people together, right? We have to have events and times where we're coming together and physically connecting with one another and talking about what's happening. And on an energetic component, how are we coming together and getting out of silos? That's one of the things. And figuring out how we are not reinventing the wheel in certain systems that are being, revamped, visited again, rebuilt. And so taking something that has this, and these systems that you're talking about, Seamus, these are old, right? However long we've been in all of these systems, these were all constructs that we all grew up within. And so how do we confront them in that sense and process them and work within them, or work around them, depending upon what the system is to first recognize what we're working with. And so it's like evaluation and, checking in and seeing who are the people that are the people in power within certain systems, whether it's city council or whether it's the state or federal government, different layers of all these systems that we've designed. And then how can we as individuals have an impact in those systems? And it is to come together and have a louder, singular voice. And that's honestly what Blueprint for Impact has done since the hurricane, is to bring as many people together as we can to have one voice that is heard by many. And this is our collaborative funding model that we've put together with the pilot projects that we're working on, as well as how we're raising awareness and amplifying the message of the region and how people are coming together, is to put a human face on it and to have it be a message that is universal. So it's not about like I was saying, any one political way, because, this hurricane, it happened right around the time of the voting, which was really interesting, so there's like this, big political thing going on in our country, and there's this major disaster happening in Asheville. And so it was honestly politicized, and people were like, oh, well, if, this is happening, and it's like, well, maybe none of that is real. Those are stories. And like whatever we're creating, what if it was just this disaster happened? It forces us to have to look at these systems and come together. And that's honestly what people have done since the beginning of time, whatever the groups have been, and this is what we've seen, is they come together, they see how they can share resource, how they can share ideas. And
Well, while we're on that topic,
yeah.
let's get into those 6 pilot projects a little bit.
Okay. So for instance, there's one project in the region. So anybody who knows what's happened in Asheville, we lost about 40% of our tree cover, which is a massive amount of trees. And imagine that all laying on the forest floor right now. And it's an enormous wildfire risk. So on top of a hurricane, we have this incredible wildfire risk, which actually happened in the spring. Thank goodness our firefighters in the region were able to put the forest fires out. But that's actually, we had like one natural disaster on top of the other, because when you have trees down, it's just timber. So imagine all of those trees down. We have this project that's going on with the National Forest Foundation and the National Forest Service to go out and harvest timber using mobile biochar units. Biochar, BIOCHAR, is a product that it's honestly it's an indigenous product. It's been going on since the beginning of humanity, farming all these things. So we use the timber and we create this product that not only handles the timber on the forest floor, we're also creating a product that's remediating the soil for our farmlands. So we're honestly taking care of 2 things simultaneously that need to happen in this region. So that's one project. Another project is Leaf Global that I mentioned, that is doing incredible initiatives locally, regionally, as well as globally, with culture keepers and working with children, with school systems in the region to bring arts and culture to Appalachia and to bring that out to the world. There's also the Blue Ridge Parkway Foundation. The Blue Ridge Parkway Foundation is the Blue Ridge Parkway is actually the most visited national park in the country. And it's one of the things with the parkway that happened after the hurricane is a lot of the access to the road, because of road being washed out, trees being, so these kinds of things. So how are we helping them to get awareness raised around their foundation? And very strategically, they have a pilot project that we're working on with them that is called Kids in Parks. And Kids in Parks, it's a whole thing that I could go into just in short. It is getting kids out into nature and utilizing actually doctors' prescriptions. Doctors are actually prescribing kids in nature, believe it or not. And so imagine a world where kids are on their devices up to 7-8 hours a day, and they're out in nature for 7 minutes a day. This is the world we're currently living in. So doctors are literally prescribing kids to go out in nature. And this is a program that we're helping them expand and get awareness around. It's wild to think that we have a culture where we're prescribing nature. I'm super excited actually to hear that. So that's exciting. So 1.7 million kids across the country have been a part of this program, and we're helping to expand it out into more states. There's also Bounty and Soul that I mentioned, which is that incredible food initiative in the region that we're helping to expand their distribution, because they currently feed, like I mentioned, almost 26,000 people a month. So they need to expand their operations and because there's a need, and especially post-hurricane, there's a big need for people to get access to good food, especially good produce. And then Loam is one of the other projects, which is Loam, LOAM, which is a microeconomy working with small business, arts and culture, and food and beverage. And so it is this beautiful project that's combining all of those into one space. And the idea behind this is, I could go so much more into detail. I'm going to try to keep this succinct. Asheville's lease economy is very high. Anybody who's rented space in the region knows this, and especially downtown. And so for the average small business owner, it's extremely expensive to lease a space and then keep your business up and going. You can imagine post-hurricane, we've had so many businesses go out of business because they just literally can't afford to keep their doors open and to grow, as a small business. And so loam is it's a powerful solution to some of the issues that we're noticing that are affecting our artists and our food and beverage scene and our small businesses. And so that's just a few of the projects. People can go and check out more of what we have at blueprintforimpact.earth. And we have all of this very outlined and detailed on the website.
Well, I just really, really appreciate this conversation and really thank you for the work that you're up to. And I'm wondering, just as a way of kind of finishing our conversation here, I'd like you just to imagine there's a person listening right now who is concerned about kind of just their daily bread, getting from point A to point B, raising their family, day to day. They got immediate things that they have their attention on. As a filmmaker, a storyteller, as somebody who, has the passion that you do, what would you say to them about why their involvement matters?
Oh man, such a great question, Seamus. Thanks for really bringing it home in that sense, because I do know that's where a bulk of the population is. And whether it's a privilege to be able to think about things beyond food, shelter, clothing, I honestly think it's every person's birthright to have access to that. And your point is very valid, because a lot of people are maxed out, they're at capacity. And this is one of the reasons Blueprint for Impact exists, because we know that there's a need in our communities to create systems, and we need groups of people thinking through these solutions. And so purely sharing this message, even if people just do that, even if people take the link to this and they send it to 10 people they know to say, you know what, there's this really cool group in Asheville, North Carolina that started after the hurricane called Blueprint for Impact. You should check out their work. They're excited to help humanity create systems, and they started in their backyard because it made sense. And what we're doing is creating blueprints, literal scalable models that we can hand off to other communities anywhere around the world. And so it is speaking to that person who might only have 2 minutes in their day because they've got to feed their kids, they've got to get to work, they've got to, come home and make dinner and do it all over again. Take the time to send a message about what this is, because that matters. The network and connection. This is one of the reasons I reached out to you guys, because I was like, I know that the network is how we get messages out there and connection. And so it's like, whether it's 10 people in the room or 100 people in the room, anybody who has the capacity to share this message and get it out to people and let people know how important this work is, because we never know who we're going to hand it off to, but that one person could make all the difference.
Oh, that's great. Well, I thank you for your time. And Christine, anything last word for you?
Yeah, really. I've been listening, especially when you got to the kids in parks. I have a nephew. While I don't have kids myself, I have I have 2 nephews, a niece. Yeah, and I know their parents have a concern that their children, have access to certain things in this world. So I'm excited for having this interview with you to be able to take this to them and say, did you know this was a thing? You could get into this. And because I don't have kids and I have all the extra income in the world of not having kids and the time, I'm even looking for myself, like my next vacation, like how Seamus shared, like actually having it be with an intention to go to a place where I can make a difference. Like use the like leverage my privilege versus take advantage of and rest back on my privilege.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thanks for saying that. I know that's honestly at the core of why I'm so excited to connect with you guys and connect with this community that you have and whomever we get this message out to. It's really about, Seamus, you talked about this at the beginning of the call, what you love so much about why you do this work. You love connecting with people. It's very natural and it feels healthy and normal. And I'm excited to be, and I know our team at Blueprint for Impact, we're excited to be vehicles to help create more of those stories, more of those connections, more of that message of how it's actually our ability to connect with one another is as simple as sending a message, is as simple as being able to look at somebody and say, I care about you and I want to, create something that matters. And so how do we create those messages? And I just feel like that's, something that we have the opportunity to do every single day, every single conversation that we have.
Well, I think it's a great place to end it. Thank you, Keresey.
Thank you, Seamus. I'm very grateful for this conversation.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Landmark Difference Makers. If you're inspired by what you heard and you want to learn more about Landmark's programs or explore upcoming episodes, visit landmarkforumnews.com to find resources, event details, and more stories of people making extraordinary impact around the globe. If you are already a part of the Landmark community, check out the Landmark subscription, designed to provide ongoing support in creating a life you love. Visit landmarkworldwide.com to learn more. Until next time, keep creating, keep contributing, and keep making a difference.